Are you a Jamaican in need of refugee protection and would like to seek asylum in Canada? Here are some things you might need to know. Canada grants refugee protection to persons facing persecution in their home countries because of their membership to a particular social group that may be stigmatized by society. Some good examples of groups facing persecution in Jamaica might be gay or queer men and women, or persons who don't fit typical gender norms. Persons with a stigmatized illness or disability, such as those living with mental illness, or persons living with autism or an intellectual disability. But what is persecution? According to the Immigration and Refugee Board, persecution must be serious mistreatment where your basic human rights are being violated and you are offered no protection by the state, meaning no protection from police or law enforcement. You may be facing threats to your life, threats of physical violence, or threats of being incarcerated by the state. In Jamaica, the current laws criminalizes the status of being gay, lesbian, or transgender, and also criminalizes any associated homosexual conduct, any sexual relations between two men or two women. Jamaica's cultural values also promotes violence against members of the LGBTQ+ community. LGBTQ+ meaning lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, or queer. If you are facing threats to your life or threats of physical violence and have found that when you reported it to police, the state offered you no protection, you might have a valid refugee claim based on a well-founded fear of persecution. Also, if you're living with a stigmatized mental illness and are at risk of involuntary hospitalization and involuntary administered psychiatric medication with no avenues of advocacy against such treatment, you might also have a valid refugee claim. If you can show that though living with mental illness, you have not been a threat to yourself or others, that you are able to live peaceably in your community and are not in need of involuntary treatment, but you're facing involuntary treatment anyway, you may have a valid refugee claim. That would fare successfully in Canada's Immigration and Refugee Board's refugee determination process. Human rights conditions in several of Jamaica's psychiatric institutions are dire, where psychiatric patients can face beatings, prolonged solitary confinement, physical restraints without being allowed to go to the toilet, and unnecessary administration of psychiatric medication, all of which are considered cruel and inhumane treatment by the United Nations Human Rights Council and are violations of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities.
A mother is speaking out this evening about an alleged beating her son got from a member of staff at Bellevue Hospital in Kingston. The mother says she's concerned for his safety and is demanding justice.
And so I said, "What happened to you?" And him said, the night staff beat him up, lick him in him head with something box him in him face, step up in him face and him chest, and change him shoes when him done kick him up in him chest, put on the iron shoes, kick him in him belly, right through till him start spit blood.
You can face this kind of mistreatment if you have mental illness or disabilities such as autism spectrum disorder or other intellectual disabilities. If you faced any of the mentioned lists of mistreatment, just like members of the LGBTQ+ community, you may also have a valid refugee claim based on a well-founded fear of persecution. Here's what you can start doing to build your case to prepare to make a refugee claim in Canada. Be prepared to show proof of your membership to this particular social group facing persecution. If you live with mental illness, this may mean showing an official medical diagnosis from a doctor or in your medical records. If you're a member of the LGBTQ+ community, you should be able to show your involvement in this community, evidence of romantic relationships and other activities within this community, such as going to events or involvement in queer advocacy groups. Try to get any documentation that show evidence of your mistreatment. In the case of members of the queer community, that may be death threats sent to you, police reports complaining of your mistreatment, photographs of injuries or hospital reports of injuries treated at medical institutions, and sworn affidavits of witnesses who have seen your mistreatment. In the cases of persons at risk of psychiatric abuse, it may be letters of complaints of mistreatment sent to hospitals, affidavits, or sworn testimonies from witnesses who saw you being mistreated in psychiatric hospitals, pictures of bruises or injuries from beatings from medical staff, or recordings of psychiatric doctors threatening to drug and over-medicate you. You can also find human rights articles and reports about the human rights conditions in Jamaica for members of the queer community or persons with mental illnesses or other disabilities or stigmatized diseases. Try to get affidavits from witnesses before you leave the country because these will be difficult to get once you've left Jamaica. And don't forget those police reports. If you can record the person threatening you with your phone, these recordings will also be admissible as evidence for your refugee hearing in Canada. Try to collect as much evidence as you can to build your case before leaving the country. These can include text messages, recorded phone calls, emails, WhatsApp conversations, and any correspondences via social media. If you have approached any human rights or advocacy groups within Jamaica for protection, but they were not able to improve your safety, this will also be important to show. So please save those correspondences so you can show the Immigration and Refugee Board member that you did all you possibly could to try to attain protection in Jamaica. If you've ever approached the media to talk about your mistreatment, such as talking about it on the radio or in television interviews, or there have been others facing similar mistreatment who've gone to the media, such as on the radio, television, or in newspaper articles, this will also be helpful. Once you have your affidavits from other witnesses, police reports, complaints of mistreatment, any recordings, electronic correspondences via email, social media, or phone, and can show that you tried multiple avenues to receive protection, you're ready to come to Canada to make a refugee claim. Once you arrive in Canada, there are several refugee social service agencies that are ready to help you file for refugee protection, obtain legal representation, and find you housing accommodations and income security or employment services. Here's what won't make a strong refugee claim. If you're escaping crime and violence or poverty, the definition of a refugee, according to Canada's Immigration and Refugee Board, is quite narrow. And if you're trying to escape issues which the Jamaican government and law enforcement are trying to do something about, your likelihood of being granted refugee protection in Canada is quite low. There are some exceptions to this rule, such as if you're a human trafficking victim and can show that even though you tried to get protection from law enforcement, you were not granted safety from your abuser. This may also be possible if you're escaping domestic or gender-based violence. But overall, the Immigration and Refugee Board may not grant you protection from something the Jamaican government is trying to do something about. And crime, violence, human trafficking, or sexual violence are things the Jamaican government are trying to crack down on. Have any other questions? You can email them to info@livingfreefromabuse.org or visit the website livingfreefromabuse.org to find resources relating to your situation. Remember, knowledge is power, and I'll see you on the next one. Laters.